Full of pain, Se-young hugged herself, called her father, called her mother, and cried like a child under 18 years old. Because he missed his parents so much and what just happened, if he really had a choice, he of course wouldn't want to be that person. Raising his hand to touch his parents' names on the steel, he told himself that his parents are very worried about him, aren't they? But don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Se-young wiped her tears with one hand and pushed her body to stand up, because the police were like flies and had come in droves, one by one. And soon the road outside the memorial park was full of cars. Siren. They brought the whole force here because Se-young alone was visiting his parents' graves. Tell your parents in heaven not to worry about me. I also promise you too that I will not forgive anyone. Even without turning his back, he knew that they had already loaded their guns and were aiming at his back, because I would kill them all without returning a single one. Raising her tearful face and looking up at the sky, Se-young knew that at that time the two of them were so desperate and miserable. But those people in the whole country did not listen to their parents, so I will not listen either. Anyone, no matter how many soldiers there are in that group of police, this child who has lost his parents will make them experience the pain of losing their children, so I will leave here as Se-young's lovely parents. Looking at the sneakers, school bags are things I used when I was a normal middle school student. As soon as I finished confiding in my parents, I heard the police officer call out on a loudspeaker, Mr. Tak Se-young. I have surrounded and mobilized the army to arrest you. Stop acting so thoughtlessly and surrender immediately. His hand tightened on the sword and he promised his parents that he would leave all the fears and injustices unheard in this place. Turning his head to look at the helicopters that were being mobilized to destroy him, he vigorously wiped the tears streaming down his face, momentarily showing a crazy look because blood debt must be paid with blood. The police shouted through the loudspeaker, Tak Se-young, please put down your weapon and surrender. If you resist you will be shot down immediately. How many police cars are here along with helicopters proves that the police are on the side. I'm not joking. Se-young glanced to the right and saw a bunch of people including vans and all, then glanced to the left and saw the same amount with a helicopter flying overhead. I don't understand why they mobilized all that trash to a place full of graves. From a helicopter overhead, a machine gun emerged, on which the pilot was ready to aim at the target and shouted to prepare to shoot. So many things like that were just for Se-young alone. He raised his eyes to see the soldiers controlling the barrel of the gun to rotate 360 degrees, firing continuously to plow up the ground under his feet even though Se-young had not shown any signs of wanting to attack them. They fired the machine guns continuously until the dust blew up and the empty gun barrels were hot. Then they stopped. The helicopter continued to fly around overhead to see if the object had been destroyed or not. No one was seen, but the police officer kept shouting through the loudspeaker. Tak Se-young asked him to put down his weapon. If he moved even a little bit, he would immediately be shot and killed. Scaring something when you've already shot someone. The policeman already saw that his words were wrong when behind that cloud of black smoke was a sword flying under the sunlight. It aimed right at the helicopter that had just shot at Se-young, but that thing couldn't avoid it with the terrible speed of the incoming sword. In a moment, the metal part that was easily pierced by the sword tip made a clanging sound and shot out sparks before the horrified eyes of the police captain. After throwing it, Se-young screamed in hatred at the place where my father and mother rested. How dare you do this? Is this a lesson for those who harass people in cemeteries? Se-young's sword stabbed into the middle of the helicopter and saw it turn upside down, instantly tilting to one side, emitting flames and losing control, crashing into the pile of police cars below. This trip could not be escaped even on all four legs. The policemen below were covered in sweat and died along with the helicopter that crashed and exploded. The group of people on the right side, including the police captain who was lucky enough to escape, were filled with horror when they realized that all the people on the left side were either burned to death or injured from the impact, lying on the ground. The culprit, Se-young, was still standing there staring at the remaining group of people. He immediately took a bullet to the right side of his cheek, making another loud noise. This shot didn't come from the police, they didn't know anything, so they replayed the direction the bullet had just come from to see what the hell it was this time. Who would have thought that as soon as the captain took a look, he saw that the bullets were not ordinary bullets, they were tank bullets. Not one but 3 tanks were lined up on the other side of the road at the cemetery. The one in the middle had just finished firing and was still emitting smoke. He didn't know when that tank got here, but what I felt was more serious was that there seemed to be movement in the black smoke in the middle of the cemetery. Indeed, Se-young was not dead yet. He came out of the smoke looking like a bull whose fur had been burned. His eyes full of contempt looked straight at the people closest to him, which were the police, making him angry. Everyone stopped and immediately started sweating. With her bare hands touching the floor, Se-young, without saying a word, pinched her body and walked from the cemetery to the place where the second column of smoke was coming from outside where she was standing. The police officer realized that it seemed to be the place where the helicopter had just crashed. He was thinking about what he was doing there, but now he realized that Se-young had to have his weapon with him wherever he went, so when they saw it, their faces turned pale. Discovering that the monster had his sword back in his hand, he swept the thunderstorm around, scattering the smoke and dust into 2 so that his eyes stared at the captain over there, filled with fear. I don't know when I stepped back. The army from behind ran loudly in the opposite direction and immediately took a defensive position along with the police team, all pointing guns at Se-young. It seemed like he was repeating history again, like the day he stepped out from the smoke on the highway. This time, Se-young did not intend to repeat that scene. He looked at the crowd with contempt, then bared his teeth, took the hilt of the sword into his mouth and lowered his center of gravity. Placing both hands on the ground, he immediately used wolf form to create body movements like a wild wolf preparing to target the prey in front of him. How do modern soldiers know what this image means? They raised their guns at the command of the police captain and fired. They immediately opened fire when Se-young's feet left the position where he was standing, without stopping his head, continuously running in the middle of the crackling bullets like that. Se-young targets those at the heart of the army, a middle-aged uncle. When he discovered that he was rushing towards him at a terrible speed, he raised the barrel of the gun to aim, but it was too late. Se-young separated from the path he was running and turned to the right and left. He was like a ball that hit the corners of the wall and bounced back from person to person. Every time he left a soldier, he left a scream of pain and blood pouring out endlessly. Obviously, without using his limbs, Se-young can still use the sword extremely smoothly to cut off the throat or some part of the body of the police and soldiers he just passed. Some guys died extremely painful deaths without even having time to yawn. Se-young's teeth were still clenched on the handle so tightly that it looked like a fierce beast sweeping through the crowd. What's going on? The police chief turned around and still didn't understand how he was still standing. Around him, people were lying on the ground covered in blood. Those who were still alive and uninjured were holding their heads and screaming due to the psychological trauma of witnessing that horrifying scene with their own eyes. Se-young found himself a place to land on the ground nearby, his mouth still holding the sword. He temporarily did not know who was leading these guys so he could attack, while everyone in the army looked at Se-young with equal eyes. Eyes filled with shock. At that moment, an order from the command came down for the general to answer the phone immediately. He picked up the phone, not taking his eyes off Se-young while listening to the other end of the line commanding him to bring that child back here alive. Hearing that strange order, he glanced towards him and sounded like he had heard wrong. Over there, again, we must capture him alive. That child will become a talent of this country. Is the command saying that the child is a guy nearly 2 meters tall holding a sword tightly and killing people wherever he goes? The command's order came down at the same time Se-young was passing through the soldiers, gradually moving deeper into their formation. Over there, we kept repeating that we had to capture him alive, causing the general to scream, how could we capture him alive? In this situation, we still had to use firepower without even scratching a layer of skin. Over there was a loud explosion after Se-young escaped from a tank shell that had just launched towards her. Yet the command at the other end didn't seem to care, insisting on orders to stop the fire immediately and not let him die. The cemetery soon became a clearing when the tank outside fired another shot at Se-young. He opened his mouth, pulled out the sword and jumped on top of the tank that had just attacked him. Landing on the roof of the tank, his weight caused it to tilt its head straight forward while his hands were firmly planted in the control chamber. Light flashed on Se-young's face and then there was a loud explosion, making the people next to the general stunned. Seeing that the other end of the line had hung up, he was so angry. What kind of kid was this kid taking alive? Giving orders without saying how? No one could do it. On the highway a few dozen kilometers away, traffic was still moving normally. A striking black Yanning Aegis car was slowly moving in the middle of the lane. Behind it was a similar car with the same words on the side. Every car was full of people wearing armor and fully equipped with guns. A middle-aged man glanced at the person behind and said that if we used those things, even if the target was wearing armor, he wouldn't be able to hold on. The young man with two parted hair threw his hand back and asked about those things. What he said was in a white pickup truck driving next to a group of black cars, in which were all kinds of guns from heavy to very heavy, lying on the floor or nailed to the wall. Both sides. You have to understand that he saw his son's head separated from his neck right before his eyes, so he must have gone crazy. The middle-aged man in front disagreed, thinking that if we made a mess like that, we would have to clean up the mess later. What a mess. The guy with the parted hair laughed with his patched mouth. Then he leaned forward and whispered to the middle-aged man, currently all the guards with contracts in the Middle East have been cancelled and withdrawn to this country. That information made the middle-aged man turn pale and ask, is that really so? If it's not true, what's the point of it? He growled. What is that? 20 times that number. People from branches all over the country are flocking to Seoul City right away. This means that all of EZ's human resources will be transferred to the capital. That information made everyone in the car silent, leaning back in their seats, mouth mumbling. The pain of losing his son might make him start a war right in the middle of this city. The fight at the cemetery was quickly transferred to the Ministry of National Defense. They were pulled into an emergency meeting again, and the head uncle of this ministry had white hair and had never seen such a terrible scene. The people below were discussing only one goal. Almost no one could offer a single useful word at this time. Rubbing his aching pain, he asked the secretary next to him, so is that kid gone? According to her, no one can currently monitor Se-young's whereabouts, so he wants to know how the Bravo platoon sent to capture that kid is doing. Someone down there said there were too many casualties, so they were requesting emergency reinforcements. Next was an angry lady on the right, urging the next battle plan because the army was still waiting for orders. He finished, called all platoon leaders and all remaining teams except Bravo team here. The secretary frowned in confusion. What level would you want to gather all the troops? With extensive combat experience, the commander had never met anyone like this before, so he wanted to know how to do it alone. That kid can injure an entire army, even destroying a tank fleet. When they received the news, Se-young was holding his sword and leisurely walking on the main road, leaving the cemetery burning fiercely, large clusters of fire rising from it without anyone extinguishing it. He was walking angrily on the street. Suddenly his eyes widened and he turned to the left to look at a familiar place under the late-day sun. Wasn't that the image of his parents carrying their young son Se-young for a walk? Play through this area or what? He refused to look at that scene for a long time, realized it was just an illusion caused by sunlight, then turned away both sad and disappointed, because that reminded Se-young of what happened next. What does he need to do to avenge his hatred? Regardless of the torn shirt behind him, he just walked steadily out of the cemetery like that. Since the day Changsu's head was beheaded in front of the media, Junhya has always been in the house, guarded on all sides by bodyguards, but still doesn't feel secure at all. He always holds his face and curses that bastard Changsu. So I'm the one who ordered it, right? The question that needs to be clarified here is whether Changsu died because he bullied someone or was it just bad luck. Looking for no answer, Junhyuk leaned back and silently cursed. Changsu is truly a trash of trash. If that dog really confesses to me, wouldn't the next target be me? He opened his mouth and gasped for air, cursing that trash Changsu to death, which didn't help anything. While cursing, the phone on the chair next to me vibrated. I was in no mood to answer the phone at this time. But on the other end of the line, the three words Kim Yoo-jin appeared, causing Junhyuk to rhyme for a while. Then he picked it up and listened with a grumpy attitude and asked, "What?" As soon as I heard the sound on the other end of the line, the blue-haired girl roared. Come on, why is it taking so long to pick up? Putting the phone away, he angrily replied, it's because of you that I picked up the phone. I don't know what the current situation is or why I'm asking. Yojin looked extremely worried, loudly explaining. I was worried about you, that's why I called. You're the one who sent Chongsu to bring someone to that brat's house. You're the one who forced Chongsu to get involved in this. Quote. The words came out exactly what Junhyuk was thinking in his mind. He was angry and confused as to how this girl knew about that. Yojin's voice is still echoing steadily on the phone. Don't you know, there have never been any secrets between Chongsu and I. Tightening the phone in his hand, Junhyuk couldn't help it. Pointed at that bastard Chongsu until he died and still reported it. Either way it would be exposed and he would roar for the other end to hear. Then what? You can tell him if you like. They go, do whatever they want. If they're good at it, they can do it all. Hearing Yojin's voice on the other end of the line. Hey, what are you talking about? Can't you say anything properly? Say anything properly while the next person might be prosecuted. The killer is me. Raising his hand to rub away his boredom, Junhyuk finally asked softly, what's the matter with you calling? Hearing the other side's piece, Yojin sat down in front of the bed and whispered, there was only one way to deal with that trash. Hearing there was a solution, Junhyuk was surprised and immediately asked, what is the solution? Immediately I heard Yojin's voice that sounded like giggling on the other side. You're not very smart, have you forgotten? That's what happened back then. Teacher Junhyuk didn't seem to remember. She just smiled on the phone without answering. After a while, she reminded her friend about the reason why that scoundrel was punished earlier. Junhyuk paused for a few seconds and then suddenly smiled mischievously. He remembered, making Yojin on the other end burst into laughter. The reason why, no matter how much pain he was in, he tried to endure the beating until the end. Remember, acting like a hero to rescue the princess and all, trying to endure this and that. So Se-young wasn't bullied from the beginning, but because he stood up for another bullied girl? At night in a series of artificial mountains and memorial parks not far away, there was the large figure of Se-young sitting huddled under a tree, sitting with her head down as if not paying attention to anything happening around her. But my ears kept moving with each step of the strangers entering the forest. The men wearing AGEIS uniforms used night vision goggles to report to the commander that the target was in the direction of Mount Gundan. Seeing the hill where Se-young sat in sight, they immediately sat down in formation with him as the center, but outside the mountain, on the highways were also blocked by Aegis's people for vehicles and weapons. Their heir was approached inside, tapping on the computer to update the situation. The guy with the parted hair chuckled deceitfully. We've caught him. Let's show him the power of Aegis, Director Park. The middle-aged man nodded to show his agreement. From then on, all the squads that had been divided into forces immediately took up their assigned positions, aiming to close in on Se-young, who was alone holding his sword under the tree in central area. They hid in the bushes not far away, constantly watching Se-young, who still did not show any strange signs, so they approached him closer and closer, gradually narrowing down to only him. A few steps away, the guy with parted hair immediately smiled mischievously and ordered everyone to start shooting. This artificial hill and mountain area is not too high. If there is any fire or explosion outside, it will be extremely clear. Indeed, a loud bang appeared right on the top of the hill. The place was on fire, a sign of mining. The fire has started. The surrounding Aegis soldiers continuously fired bullets at the central position, where Se-young was determined to be. They closed the circle smaller and smaller to ensure that soon many holes would appear on this kid's body like a basket. No one was seen coming out of the smoke. One guy smirked. Death was certain this way. Unexpectedly, the person he said was dead just appeared behind him with a sword. With just one wave of his hand, he cut his colleague's body in half. Then, as quickly as he could, Se-young approached the guy who had just said that and cut his throat. He was extremely decisive. Only the words, could be heard on the other end of the line, causing the guy with parted hair to panic. The sound from the brave man along with the voices screaming without clearly seeing a signal transmitted continuously towards the guy with curly hair. The fragmentary images that he pieced together were all scenes where Se-young was punching this person to kill that person and some scenes where no one could grasp the location where he was standing and had to die painfully. The current situation was going too far from what the parted hair expected. His face darkened, his scarred mouth mumbled. Here, what is this? On the artificial hill, there were loud explosions and black smoke rising, just like the places where Se-young had been targeted before. He flew out of a cluster of smoke, aimed at a group of vehicles parked on a nearby highway, and his strong body made a thud sound, making everyone present stunned. Who would normally jump down a height of dozens of meters and land like that? Everyone stopped all actions to look in bewilderment at the smoke that had just risen, and then suddenly out of it came Se-young's huge body. The guys in the car now only have Doraemon's magical door to escape. A shrill scream rang out from inside the car. Then the entire four-wheel drive overturned and flew off the highway and down the cliff. The news about dangerous hostage kidnappers who dared to challenge the authorities at Samsung Station was still among the hottest news in the following few days. Everyone was anxiously waiting for the news. Everyone is discussing how dangerous this guy is. Currently, a nationwide arrest warrant has been issued, and they even opened a meeting of experts to ask what they think about this matter. Crime expert Park Bom-jun believes that he suffered psychological trauma due to losing his parents at a young age. Next is the comment from the adolescent psychologist, wondering why he didn't do this until 3 years later. Maybe his psychological problem is because he wants to create his own world. One of them speculated that perhaps the shock of that year had created an antisocial psychological state. Mr. Lee Bang-suk, a psychiatric expert, drawled, "No matter what the reason, killing people is not allowed. It is a matter of law." So they all turned to face the camera, calling for help from the community to coordinate with the police to capture this dangerous criminal. The article that day appeared continuously on car radios, saying that people in times like these need to trust the police, because they always fight for the safety of people across the country. The government repeats this over and over again, including the broadcasting of entertainment channels. They also do their best to raise people's awareness. In school, kids somehow grasp the news very quickly, asking each other, "Have you seen people commenting on that hot topic?" In closed forums, the clip of Se-young executing Chong-soo in the double-fronted building the other day was spread, along with countless comments below, mainly emotions of surprise and joy when something bad happened to others. As long as it's not related to me, they're willing to contribute a word to make the fire grow stronger. At the police station, it's been almost a week since the criminal investigation team received this case. One of them reported, "We went to Tak Se-young's residence and brought all of his belongings there. Here to begin the investigation this morning." A girl sitting at the back said that currently the crime scene investigation team is going to his house to collect more information and see if he has any interactions with the neighbors. The group leader wearing thick glasses lifted it up grumpily, "Can't we find anything on social networks?" That sister responded immediately, "Although we got involved as soon as the hostage kidnapping incident happened, Tak Se-young lives completely isolated from the outside world." Having said that, the captain didn't believe him and insisted on finding out something about his private life. "Isn't it common for people at that age to show off on social networks?" She frowned and repeated, "Tak Se-young does not use any social networks. We even investigated the access history of home websites without any trace, not even online entertainment. From beginning to end, he only focused on revenge and building his body to its current size." Her voice became quieter. "We tried to salvage something from the website history but there was nothing." Ignoring that for now, the captain told everyone the latest information today. Tak Se-young went to the memorial park where his parents are buried, expressing his determination to kill everyone. "Our team must definitely catch that kid." Suddenly, the big white-shirted police officer below hesitantly spoke up. It was impossible to know about that, making the captain completely angry. Because he knew his attitude was like that, at first this crew cut guy didn't want to speak up. "That's the thing, now I can tell the captain, we are not updated with the main news sent by the field team, so the results of the battle between the police army and Se-young are not updated." Criminal investigation team. At this point, he was shocked to discover from his colleagues' words that the command said that after the investigation was completed, It was not certain that things would return to the way they were, but more importantly, the superiors wanted to investigate. Investigate the criminal investigation team, not investigate Tak Se-young. I don't understand what's going on. The military insists that this is a military secret, so they don't say anything or give any information, so they separate the police's criminal investigation team from the latest information that the military has. The guy wearing glasses went crazy and punched the sign and publicly cursed it in front of so many people. Are the people in command crazy or something? Why do they always do things on their own? My colleagues didn't really understand. If the police didn't investigate this matter, it wouldn't matter if the army investigated. It's just that the guy wearing glasses couldn't understand. No matter how strong Tak Se-young is, he is still alone, without accomplices or terrorists. So why did the command suddenly jump in? This is inherently police work. While venting, suddenly the desk phone rang with long rings. Not only the desk phone, but the personal phones of everyone in the police station also rang because someone was calling. On the other end of the landline phone was a subordinate's voice calling out, "Captain, we received a special protection request from Jang Soo-young." His subordinates also continuously reported the news that a group of people came from nowhere and that people on Se-young's list might come to assassinate him and asked all their guards to leave. They said it was someone from the command who came to request the disbandment of the forces so they could work. He angrily gritted his teeth and cursed, which meant that the police were completely left out of this game without any official news. What the hell is going on? All the latest information is sent by the military to the intelligence planning room, where there is a boss with a big belly sitting at a separate table in the corner, smoking a cigarette, puffing while looking at information on the computer. The employee pushed the door in with a yellow file, so he immediately dusted off his cigarette and asked if he had found anything. Showing the file in front of his boss, he said that he had found a person named Go Yun-jin who was currently living in America and had her address. Who was this strange person? He tilted his head and asked. Only then did he realize that it was Tak Se-young's aunt, with a complete and clear background clipped in a yellow folder. She changed her nationality after studying abroad and married a foreign man. The assistant also said, "We have already contacted the embassy in the US to intervene." Taking a long drag of his cigarette, he reminded her to pay attention to her language to better understand the situation, but don't be too nice, put a little pressure on her to let her know this matter is serious. How important? Glancing at the old eyes behind the round glasses, he continued, "If possible, let her return home immediately, and if something unexpected happens, you understand what to do." He solemnly told us that we had prepared a lot of things, that those little spring events were already within our expectations. A few hours later in an apartment building in Los Angeles, USA, two men wearing suits came to the house on the first floor and knocked on the door. While Yun-jin and her husband were at home, they said they were from the Korean embassy. Made her extremely wary. Why did the embassy come to people's homes at this time? She went to the door and twisted the handle to reveal a small gap, asking if they were here or not, looking extremely shy. Suddenly, the door was grabbed tightly and pulled outwards, causing Yun-jin to step back in alarm. If the door didn't have a lock, they would have rushed into the house to arrest her. "What are you guys doing? How can you be so impolite?" Still keeping a serious tone, the man peeked half his face inside and repeated in a commanding voice, "Please open the door. I am from the Korean embassy." The couple stood close together, still not wanting to welcome these people but kept a distance from them. If you asked him what was going on, he would quickly say it. He changed his tone to polite, asking if I could come inside to talk, but the colleague next to me impatiently shouted loudly from outside, and immediately opened the door. Yun-jin immediately yelled back, "Why'd I have to open the door for you guys?" Only then did the glasses-wearing brother lower his voice and say, "I came here because of your nephew." Yun-jin started to feel that something was not quite right, but she didn't say it until the other person asked, "Is Tak Se-young your nephew?" Yun-jin felt more and more that something was wrong, so he asked in a trembling voice, "Did something happen to my Se-young?" People said he was in a very difficult situation, so she reached out and opened the door. Without knowing what it was, Hyun-jin quickly ran out there and took off his keychain to talk to someone to see what was wrong with his Se-young. Who would have thought that outside the building, there were a large number of American mobile policemen lined up in formation, aiming their guns straight at Hyn Jin. He wore protective gear and shields like he was a citizen fighting against reactionary troops. A good person like Hyn Jin was truly surprising. More than 10 meters away, suddenly a man's voice called Hyn Jin by both her Korean and English names. That person was tall and wearing a suit, with an Asian face, but on both sides were two people armed to the teeth as escorts. He had a smile on his face that seemed polite to Hyn Jin, but somehow it was dangerous and her instincts were telling her, there must be something very bad going on. Taking slow steps on the road, Soo-ho suddenly called Hyn from behind, making him angrily replay it, asking if something was wrong, say it quickly. Soo-ho did not answer but held up the phone with the light on the screen showing the 3 words Nam Hae-jun, making the disgusted look on So-yun's face increasingly clear. As soon as he heard So-yun's grumpy voice pick up the phone on the other side, Hae-jun trembled and greeted him. It was clear that So-yun didn't really want to talk, but Hae-jun still smiled sweetly, asking if he was okay and if he was injured anywhere. I don't understand why this bastard is calling me at this time. So-yun doesn't want to say too much, just tell you to take care of yourself. If you don't have anything, don't call me. Afraid that the other party would hang up, Hae-jun quickly said that there were many policemen who came to his house to protect him, so he was okay, right? So-yun's voice on the other end of the second rang out clearly. Hey Hae-jun, do you think I also have a father who is a lowly civil servant like you? On the other side, Hae-jun's flattering voice rang out. Yes, there must be many special agents protecting you, right? So-yun felt less upset, he was confident with this many people around him. If Brat Tak Se-young appeared he would die on the spot. He stopped and listened to Hae-jun's phone call, saying he wasn't at home. Anyway, Hae-jun had to lower his voice to call to ask after him, so when he asked where you were, the other end of the line immediately replied. I live in Gyeongsang, isn't Gyeongsang very far from Seoul? Hearing Hae-jun's surprised voice, So-yun immediately smiled and said, staying at home isn't very safe, so last night my father sent me to the American military barracks in Gyeongsang. Indeed, he and Soo-ho are now surrounded by guards in one of the safest areas in Korea, because America's most advanced weapons are gathered in the camp. Junsun, he smiled confidently, that brat won't be able to find me, but I think he will come to my house to look for him. Hearing Hae-jun's shaky voice predicting on the other side, I'm sure it will be safer there than at home. He corrected angrily. Not even a fly would dare to fly here. How do you know, right? The more Hae-jun spoke, the more trembling he sounded. He agreed, saying there was no safer place than there. But So-yun couldn't hear the strangeness on the other side, so in the end she said, stop being so messy, I'll hang up. The guy on this side seemed to be freed. He gritted his teeth and trembled until he could finish the conversation just now, but after hanging up the phone he still couldn't breathe a sigh of relief, because his teeth and lips kept chattering together. Call Sei's name, Se-young. Please forgive me this time, please. The smell of fresh blood permeated the room with the door closed tightly, because all the guards protecting Hae-jun were dead on the floor. Finally, he was able to speak frankly, begging Se-young to leave him alive. I've already done all the things he wanted, please. Speaking of this, he cried 2 streams of tears. No matter how much he asked, he also heard something else. So-yun is at the American barracks. Glancing at the brick wall where the sword had slashed several horizontal and vertical marks, it looked terrifying. His voice sounded preachy. I only listened to that guy's words. So-yun was the one in charge of everything. Not seeing Se-young say anything, she rushed over and grabbed his thigh and begged. I beg you, please don't kill me, I was wrong. Pressing his face close to Se-young's pants, he cried for a while as if all the tears had drained from his body. Just heard Se-young calling, hey Hae-jun. Thinking he would be spared, he raised his head and smiled for good fortune, but unexpectedly encountered a difficult question. When I begged, what did you guys do to me? That question was hard for him to answer. His trembling turned into panic when Se-young roared, we begged and begged, but what did you do? He pulled out his sword and pointed it at the top of little Hae-jun's head, trembling like a tree beneath his feet. Damn, no need to say more. He aimed right at that cruel face and stabbed his sword down, only to hear a loud sound echoing throughout the whole building and then disappearing after a few seconds. In Shinjin Hospital, on the top floor, the lights were on and there was a special care room for the rich with a single bed, where Mr. Yang was lying with most of his limbs in casts and a breathing tube to the mouth. According to reports from his subordinates, the ribs and spine were both broken and not healed properly. Yang Mu-yeol was seriously injured in her limbs. If not broken, her joints were tight, and her internal organs suffered serious bleeding. From beginning to end, the old man sitting on the sofa did not say a word, simply listening and receiving information because for him this was the end of the hunted. From the mouth of his subordinates, he learned that the Minister of Industry and Trade had to resign last night. The sharp eyes could not hide the traces of time. They looked down and asked what happened to the association. He clearly replied that all the employees were on standby waiting for orders. Having said that, suddenly the phone on the table vibrated. Two were vibrating, but the one on the right said Li Du-jang of Shinjin Company was picked up as soon as it vibrated for the first time. On the other end of the line, Du-jang politely greeted him. It had been a long time since he last contacted him. It was really a long time. He asked in a loud voice. Surely he was having a hard time with the recent uproar? All the time. Hearing Oh and Dung ask about him, Du-jang thanked him in a low voice for asking about me first, while Mr. Yang was extremely injured because of my stupid son. Yet the old man's voice on the other side sounded very calm. As a security guard, injuries are inevitable. Du-jang's voice was clearly regretful. I was really ashamed. Teacher Yang did this because I put pressure on the relationship between my father and the chairman. Having to agree is something I don't want, and then because of my stupid son, I'm in this critical situation. Before he could say more, the old man's slow voice on the other side interrupted. Don't worry too much. Mu Jian will never blame or criticize anyone for the choice he made for himself. If you are determined to protect someone, you must always be ready to die for that person. That's what you call a vigilante. Before Du Yang on the other side started his sinful song again, he interrupted by asking, still haven't caught that kid yet, right? So what are you going to do? He already has a clear plan to inform Eon Dung that the army and police are focusing on hunting down that boy. He will soon be eliminated. Hearing that, he was relieved. He held the phone away, hung up the call, and silently sat alone thinking. The image of that boy made an old man like him remember the feeling he had 20 years ago. When he looked at that person's face, he had the same feeling of horror as he does now. That memory will never be forgotten. Okay. Behind those old eyes when opened is a calmness that is hard for anyone to match. He ordered the subordinates behind him to call the other party. The simple order made him stunned, asking, is it true that you want to call the chairman? The old man didn't answer anything. He still had many things to think about. In the majestic greenhouse of the capital, Sung Shul is sitting at the presidential table. Although he is still 2 days away from taking office, he is already considered by everyone to be the current president. Speaking through the phone with the speaker on, Sung Shul wanted the police chief on the other end to briefly explain the situation to him. Sung Buk picked up the phone and exclaimed that criminal Tak Se-young had come to one of the people on the previous warning list. The son of Nam Ki-young, deputy director of the tax department, was murdered last night. Currently, they know that in addition to the 2 police teams protecting the private house, all the army's soldiers have been killed, and the scene is currently being cleaned up. Sung Shul's face turned pale and he wanted to know if he had the whereabouts of that kid yet. Sung Buk currently only has the news that the brat is heading towards Se-young and his men are chasing. Being quiet on the other end of the line for a while, Sung Shul told him clearly what I was about to say. On the other end of the line was the president's aggressive voice, immediately arresting Nam Ki-young, not allowing anyone to contact him. The other end of the line still didn't quite understand, so Sung Shul had to continue explaining his plan. He wanted to pave the way for Tak Se-young to ban vehicles and people from passing through that area. Don't do anything to that kid, just let him go where he wants. As the head of the police department, how could he let a criminal run wild like that? Sung Buk thought he heard wrong, so he remained silent on the other end of the line, causing the president to become extremely impatient and scream. Stop the media and press from loitering in that area for me. If there are any reporters working at the scene, they must immediately confiscate their cameras. No, guys like that just keep detaining them. Immediately and forever. Sung Buk is the person who understands the law the best. He can't just be caught because people are filming him. He's planning to explain further. On the other end of the line, I heard the sound of banging on the table. Sung Shul angrily said, I will take responsibility for everything, so the police chief can't say anything more. Sung Shul uncomfortably loosened his tie. 2 days later, it was the presidential inauguration ceremony. Until then, it was best that no one knew about this. The chief's hesitant voice on the other side still reached his ears, but I couldn't guarantee that everyone wouldn't know. Who knows, as long as it doesn't get broadcast on the news, don't worry about the kids' nonsense on the internet. Do you understand? Sung Shul's expression is now uncompromising whether it's criticism or support. Everything is decided by what appears on TV. No need to worry about noisy kids on social networks. What? I wanted to say something more to save the situation, but Sung Shul on the other end of the line did not allow it. Chief Lee, because a new government will have important roles established. Saying that threatened his career as an official, the other end of the phone immediately rang out a voice of agreement. Se Young and his beloved lightning sword glided through the streets like someone was reading a book. That's just candy on the street. He looked back and forth, forgetting the fact that he was a wanted murderer, only feeling that now he was so tired from walking that he wished he had a driver's license. He walked step by step until he touched the nearby bus, scaring people to death and running away immediately, afraid that if he ate Se Young's hot product, he might have to ask for his head back if he was reincarnated. He glanced down at people who were scared every time they saw him without saying a word. Not long after waiting, he saw the bus waiting to arrive. The driver yawned, but saw a big young man standing taller than the roof of the bus, waving his arms. Looking at his face for only 2 seconds, he was already awake and jumped up in terror. The car waited until it was almost touching and then just passed Se Young, deliberately ignoring this customer. It would be best for those criminals to accept their punishment silently, but it seems none of them know how to repent in the slightest. So whoever stands up for them, those bastards are just bad people like them. He saw people whispering through walkie-talkies in the corners of the streets. Even those who pretended to know nothing were just as bad as those who fought against him. Those people must be punished. Se Young has made that decision, so no matter who comes forward, he will not let go of the bad guys on his list. Before Se Young reached the Dongsan American military barracks, the car taking Su Young just in time stopped right in front. Nam Ho Chung was unhappy when he remembered the day the president talked about taking Su Young to the American military camp for shelter. She tried her best to say that the current level of protection for Su Young was equivalent to protecting the prime minister, very tight and safe, but the other side still insisted on taking her over there. No matter how many times Ho Chung persuaded her, he still pushed her away. So even though she still complied with the mission, she was not very happy. Wherever the bus went, dozens of people followed Se Young and reported his movements to the command immediately. A few hundred meters in front of his direction, there were people from the police and army directing the bus so that the bus could continue to take him to the point Se Young needed. Although there are no problems at the moment, everyone wants to know where this kid will end up. One person called out to the captain, if he doesn't go through Wonhyo Bridge, will he have to go over Mapo Bridge? That direction seems to go to Yeongdeung Po with Dahun, right? Having just heard the report through the security department, they were able to determine that Se Young's current direction would be over Mapo Bridge or Hong Kong Bridge, possibly heading towards Dahun. The captain heard, but he just told them to leave it alone. The current order was that if there was something going on, just show up at the scene and clean it up quickly. The subordinates looked at the captain with wide eyes and thought he was talking in his sleep, but in fact he was not very interested in this. The problem is that it only needs to be like that for 2 days. Our careers depend on these 2 days. Just saying it so simply for his subordinates to understand, but the team leader was extremely upset because he had to work against his will. Suddenly, the surprised sounds of the people watching were heard on the intercom, gradually changing to sounds of panic and then urgent voices calling for each other to quickly stop him. The captain immediately grabbed the walkie-talkie and asked the other side what was going on. One person answered him with news that no one could have imagined that Tak Se-young had just entered the area of the American military camp. The whole group of policemen stood up immediately. The unbelievable captain shouted into the intercom, "What did you just say? How did he get there?" The other end of the line heard a clear hesitation, because it wasn't a matter of how. Se-young simply broke through the wall and walked inside. That place was still filled with smoke like a punctured tank. Just hearing it, it didn't look human at all. Still barefoot, Se-young stepped into the territory of the American soldier camp with his beloved sword in hand. He took aim at his spot, which was quite close to the center of this camp in the forest, took a deep breath, then opened his mouth and roared out the 3 words, "Lee Soo-yun." His screams echoed in all 4 directions of this barracks like the way someone placed a candy bar speaker in the middle of the street and sang a love song. It's just that the song Se-young wants to sing for them, "I'm Afraid" is the last song. Just now, before destroying the wall of the military barracks, he stepped down from bus number 16 without turning around and called out to you. The driver was still panicking over there. He thought he was about to be beheaded. She quickly hugged herself and cried out pitifully, "I can't see anything, please spare my life." Se-young then tilted his head and whispered, "I'm sorry," then carried the lightning rod straight to the solid brick wall of the soldier barracks, making his uncle not understand anything. "Oh, so you don't intend to take my head?" The moment Se-young arrived at this American military camp was also the moment So-young got out of her private car, not paying attention to the uncomfortable look of the guard next to her. The two walked into the hotel area. The little girl was always pouting. The evil Lee So-yun knew she was coming but didn't come out to greet her. Right at that moment, the two heard a loud thud from not far away, echoing so clearly that even the ground below shook. The red warning light howled loudly as if there was a war coming, making So-young not dare to complain anymore but turned around to look at Ho-chung like his life-saving buoy. What's going on? Why is it suddenly like that? She didn't know anything, but she couldn't say she didn't know, so she pursed her lips and kept a calm expression. "Don't worry, it's okay. Let's go inside quickly." Ho-chung's expression made the president's daughter calmly listen and not ask anymore. That loud noise was to warn the giant Se-young who had just stepped inside the territory of the Dongsan military barracks, and no one else was coming in here. He walked into their place, took a deep breath and roared, "With the name Lee So-yun in the middle of their house like that, how could they not be on high alert?" Suddenly, right at the turn in front of him, a colorful American military vehicle appeared in front of him and 2 more vehicles appeared in 2 directions next to him. A large number of people came out from there, all pointing guns at Se-young, asking him to stand still. "What the hell are these big-nosed blonde guys talking about? Put your hands and all that doesn't make any sense." Se-young just finished 8th grade. How could he understand American language and act like this until a faint Korean accent rang out, "Tak Se-young, you illegally trespassed into the American barracks." I'm just starting to understand what people are saying to me. It turns out that side asked me to put down my sword and raise my hand. If you rush in here and are still afraid of guns, then you're not the main character anymore. He simply said, "There's someone I need to find here," but the other side doesn't listen. They roared again, quickly put down their swords and raised their hands. If that side didn't listen, Se-young pretended to be deaf and continued, "The names of those 2 people were Lee Soo-yun and Lee Soo-ho." That side continued to repeat again, asking him to quickly put down his sword and raise his hand, only to see Se-young's hand tightening the sword hilt, making them immediately tense, wanting to shoot. Looking back and forth at this situation, it was clear that there was no need for negotiation. Finally, he roared in anger, causing the green-haired, green-nosed group to begin to realize that something was not quite right. He jerked himself away from where he was standing, causing rocks and dirt to scatter. The American soldiers raised their heads and looked away, watching the shadow of a giant who had just soared dozens of meters high like a superhero without underwear. Holding the sword in one hand, he clenched his fist in the other, preparing to look down on the group of damned people who all looked the same. His face was full of indignation. He just wanted to hit the guy who kept asking him to put down his weapon just now, causing Dongsan's whole house to explode with a terrible noise. Just as they opened the network with an extremely intense series of waves, creating white smoke whose shape could not be clearly seen, the American soldiers saw something pop out of the smoke. According to the commander at this time, the whole group regained their composure and did not hesitate there the whole time. Who would have thought that a person could do this to this extent? Something rushing towards them and then stabbing into the ground in front was the sword that Se-young always carried with him, now standing tall in front of the smoke, making everyone tense and wait. There was nothing unusual in that white smoke until Se-young's strong body jumped out like an arrow. He placed his feet on the hilt of the sword, pushing it with his own strength. Not even the concrete road below could stop its speed. The blue-eyed old soldier saw a scene like this for the first time. He thought he was at a movie theater, but the army vehicle was easily sliced open like a slice of cake with a single passing move from Se-young. The collision sounded loudly and then the area exploded with a loud explosion of gasoline, alerting the nearby tank, which turned its gun barrel towards Se-young, who was now holding his sword. He jumped away immediately when the bullet shot out from the tank's gun barrel, then his eyes precisely aimed at the point where he needed to cut. The hand swung the sword across a line that cut the tank in half horizontally, causing it to explode once more, then bent its butt and ran out of the bullets that were being sprayed by the infantrymen. If one couldn't keep up, he would hold out his sword to catch it, making a clinking sound, not even flinching at all. He took aim at the man closest to him and rushed over with his sword, pushing him hard into the wall behind him in what is called being stuck in the wall. The man next to him was so scared that he wanted to pee out of his pants. He didn't need to cock the gun, but Se-young swiped his sword and saw that the upper and lower parts suddenly opened up into a delicious section. He shot people out of that place right when the left side was firing bullets. His arms and legs slid along the ground. Se-young slammed his sword down to make a fourth point, then he jumped up high to avoid the bullets that were continuously discharged from the war vehicle from over there. When he jumped down, he aimed right at the roof of that car and threw the sword down in front of him. Everyone followed and accurately placed it on the soldier inside controlling the gun, and immediately there was no more ammunition. Again, it was also surprisingly quiet inside. The soldiers now realize that they are extras in a Hollywood movie in which Se-young plays the main character. At this moment, he stood straight up on the roof of the car, pulled out the sword bathed in fresh blood, making everyone feel like the guardian angel of hell was appearing before their eyes. The CIA headquarters in the US, a few minutes away, received a video recording of the army inside the military camp confronting Se-young. From the beginning, they intended to broadcast live his image as a monster passing through the US command. The crowd of people watching was completely silent, then a black man in there let out a low laugh, completely fake, more horrifying than the blockbusters I watched on Tom's channel. The white-haired woman sitting opposite felt her voice tremble, wondering how someone like him could do this. Her comment made him no longer happy. He immediately stopped laughing and seriously reminded everyone that our entire volunteer force had been disabled in just a single minute. She turned around and asked, "The fighting project being developed at Droppa will have no meaning anymore if we can't take down a guy like this kid." He glanced at the white-haired woman with disdain. It was just an unfinished project, but it was only valid for 20 years. Another politician asked, "We also have similar programs to strengthen fighting forces." The short-haired lady next to her answered, "Yes, it is possible by injecting drugs into the body or using machines to upgrade strength. But for normal people like us, we can only increase our strength by about 30%. In short, pants cannot compete with that monster." As tight as a string, suddenly a humming sound rang out in the classroom. Everyone's eyes focused on the guy in the white shirt sitting at the opposite end of the slideshow. While twirling the white phone in his hand, he said, "I'll fly to Korea in an hour. Does anyone want to go with me?" His expression looked like he went to Korea to eat tteokbokki, not to stop the monster that was destroying his barracks. Squinting his eyes, the blue-haired man reminded the people below, ordering our military forces to stop attacking. Those words were aimed at the black man, causing him to stop immediately. "This is it, this guy's madness has reached its peak." Pon spread his arms in excitement as he looked at the screen. Such a precious experimental object could not be damaged. The military side of Dongsan Barracks quickly received news from the Americans. They still stood in line to confront Se-young, who had just finished taking down the car over there. He reached out one hand and grabbed a piece of metal on it, pulling it off as easily as tearing a piece of cloth. Seeing this scene made the soldiers shocked. Hearing the loud sound of that piece of metal being placed down again, Se-young just created a homemade shield to block himself before rushing into the crowd in front of him. Those bastards can escape anywhere they want, but I will fight straight to get to those bastards. Just as he was about to rush into an extremely intense fight, he suddenly heard someone's urgent voice whispering loudly. Anyone who watches a lot of American action movies will probably understand, but the old Se-young doesn't entertain in any form, so he doesn't know what these snotty-nosed Americans are talking about. But it's so strange, the group of people who were lined up just now looking at him with disdain now part ways, as if they're paving the way for me. When Sung Shul received the news, he went crazy at the other end of the line. What did he say? That brat had already broken into the American soldier camp. Sung Buk was sweating profusely and reported that the suspect had gone into the barracks to run away because the police force had been told to give way to him, so there was currently no way to capture information inside the barracks. Before he could finish speaking, the president on the other side hung up. He transferred the call to his daughter's personal bodyguard, Nam Ho Chung, nervously asking where she was. Glancing back, the bodyguard said she was following the president's orders. She was currently in the hotel of the Dongsan American military barracks. There were also So Yun and Su Ho in the same room. Not having heard Sung Shul's next instructions clearly, the other end made a few buzzing sounds and then turned off completely. She immediately took out her phone and saw that it had completely lost signal, so she walked out the door and asked a guard to give her the phone to borrow for a moment. As soon as the screen opened, it seemed like something was wrong. Why did his phone also lose signal? Could it be that someone intentionally interfered with the signal? Looking around suspiciously, Ho Chung thought this was normal if American soldiers were making some sort of battle plan, but she kept seeing something wrong. She couldn't figure out what was wrong. That's why it's so stressful. Outside, Se-young was wondering what the purpose of these American soldiers was. They did not retreat completely but just stood there to pave the way for her to go. Although she was surprised, Se-young was not worried at all. Calm down, because anyone who stands in my way will be killed without mercy. Su-young spoke up to break the silent atmosphere in the room. I was talking to Yo-jin just now. Did you two know? He said he had a plan to make that monster not dare to touch him. Me. Of course So-young wanted to listen, because she was scared to death by the scenes she saw Se-young could do. Su-young said, according to what that girl said, once that method is introduced, the kid will have to come to us on his own. How is it so magical? So-young asked, are you talking about arresting that guy's relatives? My father has already sent someone to work. That was one of the first things So-young thought of, so she told her presidential father to do it. But do you know that when I told that story to Jojin, that girl burst out laughing? And finally, what does it say? So-young covered her impatience. If that girl doesn't say anything, then ask Jun-hyuk. Those two are so close that they don't tell each other anything. Talking about that, So-young suddenly felt really dirty. That damn guy laughed in my face and said, why'd I have to tell you? It made me terribly angry. Don't be discouraged when someone knows a solution that you don't know. So-young said harshly to So-young, that guy probably doesn't think he can do anything better than my old man can do. After speaking, the boy cursed loudly and some vulgar words fell into So-young's ears, making her completely uncomfortable. Looking at Suho, he ordered me to go down and get me some water from the car. The water here kept smelling like I couldn't drink it. Soho left immediately, and by the way got water for So-young. There were so many girls and boys, it was impossible to drink normal water in the barracks, so he agreed to go immediately. As soon as she opened the door for Suho to leave, Ho Chung thought for a moment and then walked to the bed where her lady was sitting. Without understanding anything, she saw the bodyguard lean over and say, let's go back to the room. Immediately frowned in wonder, why so suddenly? I wanted to stay here with So-young a little longer. Suddenly Ho Chung's hand on her shoulder tightened until it hurt. She leaned close to the lady's ear and whispered, I have a bad feeling about this, so please follow me. Nodding slightly, So-young agreed to follow her, but whispered what the hell So-young didn't hear in front of her, making her indescribably annoyed. As soon as she closed the door behind her, So-young saw her turn in another direction, so she followed and asked where she was going. This direction is not to my room. Just after walking out, less than 10 steps, I heard a crash in the room, followed by a man's pitiful scream. So-young just turned around in panic and was caught by the police. The guard immediately pulled away and told him to run quickly. So-young was still sitting on the chair, but now he had his face planted on the ground and trembled as he turned around to look. Unexpectedly, his eyes caught sight of something so terrifying that it made him lean back, crawling and crawling, trying to get away. Behind to the point where the guards burst into the room without even the slightest feeling of peace of mind. As soon as these guys entered, they were scared to death when they saw the monster that everyone had rumored appeared right before their eyes. Se-young's huge silhouette stood blocking the light from outside the window while Se-young's hand stood there. He was holding up poor Soo-ho's head. So-young's teeth and lips chattered together when she once again looked directly at the name that had scared her to death for so long. Se-young looked around the room, saw the remaining target trying to crawl towards the door. He jumped up and threw Soo-ho, pushing blood onto the floor next to So-young. Just looking at him, So-young felt a surge of terror in her heart. The throw was so strong that the floor smoked and hissed, rushing away to see clearly that Soo-ho's skull had been crushed to pieces. The original appearance is unrecognizable. Therefore, it motivated So-young to crawl, run, and scream toward the door to escape the monster Se-young, leaving him to the bodyguards who were rushing in the opposite direction. Who would have thought that before leaving the room, the lightning sword was launched and stabbed straight at a bodyguard on So-young's left. Only less than 5 meters away from the door, it already felt like that sword should have been stuck on its body, while its owner was extremely calm, not even bothering to raise his face. 2 guards appeared in front of So-young, immediately raised their guns and shouted, "Shoot!" Then fired 2 high-quality bullets into the giant in front. Who would have thought that Se-young's fierce eyes captured everything, ignoring the explosion of bullets that destroyed the top floor of the barracks hotel. On the highway right now is a black 4-wheel drive vehicle speeding regardless of speed to bring Do-young extremely impatient to find his son. He kept cursing in worry. At that moment he saw the phone next to him vibrate, so he opened it and shouted loudly, "Damn it, why are you guys calling now?" From the other side came a confused voice explaining that all communication methods to the barracks had been cut off, so we had no way to communicate outside. He didn't care. He immediately asked how the situation was there. Who would have expected to hear from their subordinates that no matter how much they said, the people of the barracks would not let them inside? He roared, causing the other side to report in fear. "I've already talked to Lieutenant Colonel Kessler of the barracks, but he still won't let me in. Now he doesn't even bother to answer the phone calls from his side." Gritting his teeth, Du-jang cursed, "You bastard Kessler, why are you blocking the door at this time?" While the father was rushing to his son, Se-young hugged his injured arm and ran at full speed down the long, wide hallway. Dozens of guards were running in the opposite direction to hold back the monster, but when he heard the fierce explosion behind him, he suddenly felt like there was no way for this group of people to stop that monster. Taking steady steps outside, Se-young just tilted her head and discovered the mouse hiding among the guards. While running, So-young silently called So-young. He went to her friend's room, opened the door and called out, "Hey Jang So-young." Unexpectedly, I was extremely shocked to realize that the inside of the room was extremely neat, as if no one had ever set foot here. Damn it, starting to vaguely realize was when fear gradually took over So-young's mind. How dare that whore do that? How dare he abandon me here? As soon as he finished cursing, there was an unexpected silence behind him. When he turned his head to look, Se-young saw a large figure hiding in the smoke caused by the collapse of a nearby wall. It was Se-young's eyes staring at So-young that made him so scared that he wanted to reincarnate on the spot. Every step Se-young takes forward is every step So-young takes backwards. After only 3 steps like that, So-young's legs couldn't move and he fell on his butt to the floor. So he faced Se-young's huge, muscular body of 2 meters standing close to him, calling out to So-young. With extreme hatred, He also shook his voice and called back to talk Se-young, but the words behind that couldn't come out. Let Se-young explain, you're the one who understands why I do something like this, right? He understood but was too scared to say it, because 3 years ago, he accidentally bumped into a kid who was older than him, which led to the events that followed. Just accidentally touching him like that was enough to make So-young angry, touching the boy's gentle smiling face. For some reason he felt bitter and uncomfortable. Looking at Se-young who was carrying a paper bag and following a girl, Hae-won frowned and asked, "What's wrong with you?" But So-young's eyes kept glued to the young couple laughing and joking in front, looking until both of them left the hallway without stopping looking. Suddenly that mouth moved and cursed the word, "Damn." Then the blood rushed to his brain. He mumbled curses, "Are these guys all blind or something when they hit me?" So that day, Se-young received his first blow, hitting his head against the wall behind him and falling to the ground. He had a foot wearing expensive white shoes stomp on his neck and face. The bully just grinded his foot on his face. Se-young just asked him to raise his face so I can see. Seeing that Se-young couldn't do it, he raised his foot and hit the other person in the face like a ball and said he was just starting now. "Are you already feeling the pain? You make me feel sleepy." Se-young was lying trembling on the floor, spitting blood, not responding, causing So-young to lose his composure and lower his body to call out both his full name and, "Do you know who I am?" Glancing at the person talking to him, Se-young simply said he didn't know. In fact he knew who this rich guy was. But the two had never talked to each other and were not in the same class, because why should I know what to do? Hearing people say they didn't know her, So-young grabbed Se-young's hair and lifted his head up to stare at her face at that moment, extremely scary and excited to bully people. "You say you don't know me, why do you dare to block my way and make me so uncomfortable?" At that time, he was naive, didn't know why people talked to him like that, so he asked again, "Since when did I do that?" So-young glared at him and affirmed, "You're the dog who blocked my way in the hallway, right?" So it was something from the morning. Se-young remembered and suddenly cried 2 tears when she realized she had become the object of being bullied over such a trivial matter. Seeing his tears fall made So-young unbearably angry. "What are you talking about? It seems like you still haven't repented." He used that as a reason to slap Se-young in the face and then hit him repeatedly in the face. At that time, Se-young knew that this guy didn't care about the reason at all. He just wanted to use an excuse to beat me. But the fact that I was beaten continuously for such a small thing made Se-young angry. Young did not mind. He gritted his teeth bitterly, trying to protect his head from the bully until a female voice rang out loudly, stopping quickly. The whole group of people turned their heads to look at the person who had just spoken. The girl who was carrying a stack of papers with Se-young in the morning was now sweating profusely due to fear but still spoke up to rescue him. Instead of feeling worried about being caught, a sly smile appeared on So-young's lips. "The past cannot go back and fix it," So-young suddenly roared. "You motherfucker, kill me, if you're good, kill me." He stood up and clasped his hands in front of Se-young's huge body, challenging him, "You try. Come in and kill me, you bastard." As soon as he finished speaking, he was panting like a dog. He thought it would make Se-young hesitate, but unexpectedly, his face showed a barbaric expression and he replied, "No rush, I will soon give you satisfaction." At that time, So-young was afraid to die, but he couldn't bear to be in such a weak position, so he continued loudly, "If I die, then your aunt and uncle will also have to die, do you understand that? Or not?" As soon as the smile on his face suddenly disappeared, he laughed happily and added, "It seems like you only now grasp the situation, sick guy." Starting to see the expression on Se-young's face change, So-young added more and more, "You trash, because of you, everyone related to you will have to go to hell together, you dog." While Se-young's hand was trembling as he grasped the sword, suddenly the barracks loudspeaker called out his name, causing So-young to turn around and feel like he had picked up a life preserver. Out there, people are talking about Se-young's aunt residing in Los Angeles, USA, Ms. Go Yun-jin, who is in danger. Sure enough, Se-young's face turned pale, completely different from the smile on So-young's lips. It was sad to know that her beloved father had taken action. Well, whether it's in America or an American military camp, as long as you have money, there's nothing that can't be solved. That's why you laughed so hard and challenged Se-young to kill me. If you're good, then kill me. You trash, you told me to kill you. Outside, the military continued to spread. We at the Los Angeles government were very worried about the safety of American citizen Go Yun-jin, so we brought her to a safe and protected place. Strictly, I hope you will come down here to reunite with your family. The bright smile on Soo-yun's lips suddenly disappeared. Only now did he bitterly understand that they weren't looking for a hostage to make things difficult for Se-young in front of them, but the situation right now was extremely unusual. Benefit yourself. His relatives are being protected? Sitting on the US government's private business jet, Pon shook the glass of wine in his hand, smiling mischievously when he heard the Korean government threaten him with Se-young's family. That strategy is also good, written in preschool textbooks. Suddenly hearing a voice announcement from Dongsan camp, one of the people who successfully evacuated from the hotel was the daughter of the President of Korea along with her guards. I don't know what combat instructions he had. No? Putting down the glass of wine, Pon seriously said no. Listening to the other side's report again, they're asking for a helicopter to leave there safely. Rubbing his patient chin, he smiled and instructed, there's no need to keep them there, just let them go if they want anything. After all, she is the new president's daughter, and we shouldn't do anything suspicious because there are also guards there. The doctor's dull eyes thought that it was nothing worth paying attention to. He looked at the clock and guessed that he would arrive at dawn the next day. From now on, just do as Pon says. Sinking back into his own space, Pon smiled happily and called out the names of those talk guys. Sure, he would be able to bring them back because America wanted him. At that time, on the top floor of the building, smoke filled the air, and a young man's painful scream rang out, making the American soldiers below not know what was happening. An arm flew across the floor. Soo-yun lost his left arm. He was now writhing on the floor in pain. He hugged his arm while crying and screaming in all sorts of ways, unable to stop it. Pain, while the perpetrator only gently used his hand to spread the bloodstains on his face. Those trembling legs wearing expensive pants were suddenly cut off from the knee by Se-young's sword tip, causing him to gasp and scream in extreme pain. The blade of the sword pulls at the tank tightly, and if it breaks, a few mixtures of calcium and zinc cannot resist it. Soo-yun has never felt so much pain and agony mixed with helplessness like now, unable to do anything but cry until her throat is hoarse because of her sadness. The expression on Se-young's face did not change at all, then suddenly he waited for him to call Soo-yun, causing him to lean up in anger and pain as if he wanted to use his eyes to kill the monster in front of him. Unexpectedly, a bright smile appeared on Se-young's mouth, then he laughed. His expression was like that of a devil in front of Soo-yun, whispering, I was planning on letting you go gently, why did you have to do that? At this moment, he did not dare to curse anymore. He could only grit his teeth and breathe heavily in pain, his eyes full of hatred shining at Se-young. He didn't need to say it, he knew what this dude wanted to do to him, so he raised his lips and smiled. Now I've changed my mind. He pointed the sword at Soo-yun's face. Knowing full well that you are not afraid of heaven or earth, so I will give you a special gift. Soo-yun's eyes stared intently at the tip of the sword in front of her eyes when she heard Se-young say to give her an ending. Her voice screamed. His voice sounded so terrible, like the demons of hell rising up. I will give you a painful end to the bone. The tip of the lightning sword made a few screeching sounds, then from there a real fire flared up, covering everything. It also emitted a few black smoke like someone soaked in gasoline. The fire lit up his stunned face to the point that he momentarily forgot the pain in his body. The pain in my arms and legs is nothing compared to what's happening before my eyes. The video of the smoking Dongsan barracks was quickly circulated across social networks. People laughed and discussed endlessly. For the past few days, Se-young has not been seen anywhere. It turns out he jumped all the way here. Then, the unrelated person gloated while the person involved rushed inside to see his son's condition. Jujang roared at the police outside, insisting that people stay away, but he wouldn't let them, so he turned into an animal and cursed, Don't you know who I am? If you don't want to get fired, then get out of here. Go out. He roared until he spat out his saliva. His heart was extremely impatient with his son, who even though he couldn't see his father, was reaching out his hand, calling for his father. Lying in the fire that burned his whole body, Soo-yeon was crying and screaming, but no one could save him. Se-young glared at the child crawling and screaming in the hallway before him. For some reason, he remembered the image of his parents hugging each other burning in the fire. A feeling of euphoria crept through his heart. Do you feel it now? This is the pain my parents felt that day. The captain of the police team was so bored that he didn't even bother to talk. He had just been promoted to the position of captain and yet he was disobeying the orders of such a big man. Suddenly, he felt that his career path was so uneven. We just apologized and explained, this is an instruction from above, we have no other choice. He immediately placed Do-jang's sideways hand, carrying all his anger, seeing that his subordinates behind him were planning to violently rush forward to demand justice for him. The captain quickly told everyone to step back, right when he saw the chairman's hand raised, preparing to slap him again. He immediately lowered his voice to almost a whisper, "You understand best. How can a brat like me dare to get in your way?" So what? Do-jang was still angry but stopped, wanting to see what the police captain had to say. He put on the most conciliatory expression possible, hoping for His Holiness to calmly think, "You should talk to someone higher up on things like this rather than making things difficult for us." Because Jang knew he was right, he added the captain's soft words, "We are inherently afraid of people like you being upset and upset." He raised his hand again, but not to slap the policeman, but called his subordinates behind him, brought the phone here to me, and was about to take out the phone and give it to Do-jang. He hesitantly announced, "President, the transmission line in this area is currently closed. We have to leave here before we can make a call." This method doesn't work, that method doesn't work either, making him so angry that he grits his teeth. Is it that difficult to just grasp his son's situation? That afternoon, Sung Pook called to inform the president, "We have successfully controlled Nam Ki-jong and brought him to the nearest hotel." Sung Chul praised the other party for doing a good job. "Just try to make him as comfortable as possible and then tell Ki-jong that I will be there right away. Try to convince him, don't make him agitated. My career is in the hands of the new president. No matter what he says, the chief will say yes or yes." Finally, I heard the president on the other side say, "I will bring a security team, so when Ki-jong arrives at the pre-arranged place, tell him to call me." After that incident, Sung Chul dared to worry about his daughter because the news of Se-young breaking into Dongsan barracks had not yet reached his ears. As soon as her hands were free, the secretary opened the door and rushed in to report that there was someone calling to look for you, Mr. Commissioner. On the other end of the line was guard Nam Ho-chung, making him startled. Just when he needed to know the news, he banged on the table and stood up, telling her to connect me immediately, eagerly asking, "Guard Nam, my child. What happened to my daughter? How is my daughter?" When he heard the calm voice of the guard on the other side, "Tu was safe now, don't worry too much," he calmed down and stopped being grumpy on the phone. Being transferred, Soo-jong covered his ears with one hand to avoid the noise of the plane's wings, telling his father that he was fine and had no injuries, causing Sung Chul to finally smile brightly. When talking about what happened just now, Soo-jong was really shocked. Somehow, the security guard knew in advance so we could escape. Passing the phone back to her, Ho-chung just tilted it back to one side and Tu couldn't hear what he was saying because the sound of the airplane fan outside was too loud. She informed the president that we plan to land at the nearest helipad and then move to Angna. He immediately agreed and breathed a sigh of relief, then suddenly remembered what about Soo-yeon, was he with her or not? Suddenly I heard silence on the other side for a while and then Ho-chung's voice hesitantly announced that when I took Soo-jong out, Soo-yeon and Soo-ho were still inside the hotel. Having said that, he already knew their fate. He was sweating but did not scold him because the voice of the guard on the other side sounded so slow that he could take Soo-jong out to a safe place. A lot already. Actually to some extent, I guess this time Tak Se-young's target was on Soo-yeon and Soo-ho, so I used them as bait. I'm truly sorry. On the other side, Sung Chul's voice also lowered to a low tone, praising her for doing a great job. No need to worry too much and remember to keep this a secret from her. Hearing her voice wanting to buy more, the president interrupted, taking the stance of a child. This was still a bit difficult to accept. Also, even though we didn't mean it this time, they will most likely use this to criticize my ethics and cause difficulties in establishing a new government. If you feel guilty, then just consider this as something I forced you to do. The previous conflict with Sung Chul immediately disappeared. Ho Chung nodded. Thank you for thinking about me. And then hung up the phone as the president said. The other phone on the table vibrated, and as soon as he glanced down, Sung Chul immediately lost his previous happiness because the caller was Lee Du-jang and he decided to ignore it and not pick up the phone. Standing there until dark but still not allowed to enter the barracks, Du-jang asked his subordinates angrily, "Are you sure you saw Su-jong enter the American soldiers' barracks?" He said he definitely saw her along with the police. The guard entered the gate with his own eyes. Furiously looking down at the phone, no one picked up on the other end. He wondered what the hell Sung Chul was doing without answering the phone. Was he so crazy about power that he ignored the phone? Ignore your daughter's life or death. Outside Dongsan barracks, there was still a long line of American soldiers blocking the road, not allowing anyone to approach with an extremely strict look, unable to do anything to them. Du-jang could only get a little angry on the hood of the car. Cursing in front of your subordinates, you bastards, how dare you be so random on land that doesn't belong to you? He feels stuck in the middle of this mess, just hoping that today will pass peacefully, then one more day to finish the matter. At that moment, a local police car sped up and braked to call the captain. He turned his puffy face and recognized his familiar subordinate. He spoke unhappily, "Why did you come back? Here, you said you were going to change shifts at the police station." Seeing his rapid breathing, the captain thought something was not quite right. From there, he learned that the police department had received a report of 2 decapitated bodies in No Jin. He paused for a few seconds. This enemy doesn't look like the young man inside the camp, and yet his subordinates enthusiastically said, "I think Tak Se-young has escaped our supervision." Returning to his police station, he heard a report that last night in an unfinished shopping mall, a man and a woman were discovered murdered in the basement. Wednesday, both had their heads cut off. The problem here is that the victims are all people from the police department. Currently, although the news is shocking, it seems that social networks and the press have not yet sniffed out anything, so the police department saves a lot of work. But the captain knows that's not the truth. They already smell it, but at this sensitive time, anything related to the inauguration ceremony is kept under wraps. Rubbing his aching head trying to connect the events together, the captain knew that Tak Se-young had now killed Nam Hai-won and infiltrated the American camp. With such a shock, the whole country did not have a single article reporting on the murder of 2 police officers who worked for Dongjang Station named Kim Jang-jun and Choi Myung-ji. According to photos at the scene, they were still wearing uniforms and in uniform, so it was easy to identify them both. Rubbing his eye sockets, the captain wanted to know the side of Dongjang Post.